When we mention Joab's career, we are undoubtedly referring to one of the most notable warriors of the ancient kingdom of Israel. A true accumulator of impressive achievements in battle, he held the position of commander of the Israelite army during the administration of King David and was also a central figure in the consolidation of Davidic power in Jerusalem. However, Joab represented more than just that. Although he was an extremely talented fighter and demonstrated impressive loyalty to King David, Joab also carried dark traits. He was spiteful, ruthless, and oscillated between acts of prudence and bouts of disturbing loss of control, which at times led him to contradict his own loyalty. In this video, you will learn in detail everything the scriptures reveal about the figure of Joab, and understand why his journey ended in such a tragic and humiliating way. Joab served as commander of Israel's military forces throughout the reign of King David. He was the son of Zeruiah and the brother of Abishai and Asahel. Since Zeruiah was David's sister, this made Joab his direct nephew. Scripture provides no details about Joab's father, only mentioning that he was buried in Bethlehem. The name Joab means, "The Lord is Father." Joab's story in the Bible begins when he is mentioned alongside his two brothers as leading David's men in battle against the army of Ishbosheth, son of King Saul. Ishbosheth's forces, led by Abner, were ultimately defeated. In this scenario, Joab's brother Asahel began a relentless pursuit of Abner. Forced to defend himself and with evident reluctance, Abner ended up taking Asahel's life. But if you think the story ended there, you're sorely mistaken. Sometime later, Joab engineered Abner's murder through cunning and treachery, determined to avenge his brother's death. At that point, Abner no longer posed a threat to David's throne. Many scholars suggest that, in addition to a thirst for revenge, Joab was also driven by deep jealousy, fearing that Abner's growing loyalty to the king would make him a potential competitor for Israel's military command. The scriptures clearly record Joab's treacherous act in taking revenge on Abner. After returning from a military mission with David's men, he learned that the king had received Abner with great approval, since he had broken with Ishbosheth, and declared support for David's unified rule over all the tribes of Israel. Joab then did everything he could to sow suspicion in David's heart about Abner's true intentions. Soon after, he devised a plan to lure Abner back to Hebron without the king's knowledge and summoned him for a private conversation. However, this invitation was merely a cover. At the first opportunity, Joab, possibly with the support of his brother Abishai, struck Abner in the stomach and killed him. Indeed, upon learning of what had happened, King David severely rebuked Joab's actions. Contrary to what was expected, he wasn't just indignant. He was furious. David declared that Joab and his family would suffer divine justice for having unjustly shed Abner's blood. In his words, the king proclaimed, "May the burden of Abner's death fall upon Joab and upon all his descendants. May there never be a lack in your house of one who is sick, who walks with crutches, who dies by the sword, or who goes hungry." Without question, Joab's act deserved complete condemnation. Furthermore, he took Abner's life in Hebron, a city of refuge where blood should not be shed. For this reason, David mourned deeply over the death of Abner, whom he saw as a noble and worthy man. As a public gesture of honor, the king forced Joab to pay respects during Abner's funeral in front of all the Israelite troops. Soon after, the biblical account highlights Joab as an extremely talented commander and a great influence in Israel. Under his leadership, David's army achieved remarkable victories in battles against powerful nations such as Syria, Ammon, and Edom. Joab was elevated to the position of supreme commander of Israel's forces when the Israelites conquered Jerusalem, which at that time was still a Jebusite-controlled stronghold. It's important to remember that, at this point, David already ruled over all the tribes of Israel, thus consolidating the kingdom into a single unified nation. Joab possessed a complex temperament, marked by contrasts. He alternated between great deeds and morally ambiguous attitudes. Even so, his contribution to the consolidation of David's reign was undeniable. Interestingly, he displayed no arrogance. On the contrary, upon conquering Ramoth-Gilead, he made a point of handing over all the glory to the king, humbly acknowledging his authority. Joab also revealed a conciliatory side at times. He intervened diplomatically when trying to restore peace between David and his son Absalom, whose relationship had been strained. And when David expressed a desire to take a census of the people, an action considered imprudent and unnecessary, Joab tried to dissuade him, revealing concern for God's will. However, on several occasions, Joab revealed a deeply reprehensible side. Besides the calculating and treacherous gesture with which he exacted his revenge against Abner, he engaged in other episodes marked by coldness, moral ambiguity, and dark decisions that tarnished his trajectory as a leader. For example, Joab did not hesitate to carry out David's immoral plan, which culminated in the death of Uriah, Bathsheba's husband. And, ironically, after having acted as a mediator between David and Absalom during the father-son conflict, it was Joab himself who took Absalom's life, openly disobeying the king's order that his son be spared. After these momentous events, Joab lost his position as commander of Israel's army. King David appointed Amasa to take his place. However, when Amasa proved unable to control the revolt led by Sheba, Joab saw an opportunity and, without hesitation, removed Amasa from his position for good. After these events, Joab was replaced as commander of Israel's army. King David replaced Amasa, but when Amasa failed to quell Sheba's revolt, Joab seized the opportunity to eliminate him. In subsequent scriptures, Joab ceases to occupy the center of the narrative. However, there are indications that, at a certain point, he restored some of his prestige with King David, perhaps due to his military experience or the weight of his history on the Davidic throne. However, the final chapters of Joab's life were marked by decline and disloyalty. In the final moments of David's reign, Joab strayed from the plans of the king he had served for decades. He allied himself with Abiathar and other influential leaders to support Adonijah's attempt to usurp the throne of Israel, openly contradicting the will of David, who had already designated Solomon as his rightful successor. Joab's choice proved a profound betrayal. David had already proclaimed Solomon his rightful heir, and by siding with Adonijah, Joab sealed his infidelity to the throne he had once helped cement. This decision, supporting the wrong cause at the most crucial moment, was undoubtedly one of the factors that led to his melancholy and tragic end. In fact, when Solomon ascended the throne, Joab fled to Gibeon to try to protect himself before the altar in the sanctuary. So King Solomon ordered Benaiah to kill him, so that the blood Joab had unjustly shed would not fall upon the house of David, a reference, of course, to the murders of Abner and Amasa. Benaiah, faithful to Solomon's decree, carried out the sentence with firmness. Joab was killed right there, before the altar where he had sought refuge. His body was buried on his desert estate, a silent end for the one who had once led the armies of Israel. And so Benaiah was elevated to the rank of commander, inheriting the position that had for so many years belonged to Joab. What about you? Have you heard the story of Joab in the Bible? Tell us in the comments.